right, so I've been here all day, so I've been listening to all of your nice presentations, and they're all to do with mainly trying to control and understand how things should be done and how subjectivity should be removed and objectivity should be emphasized in archaeology, especially when to do with gaming. And basically what I'm going to explain now is exactly the opposite. So I'm dealing with emotions, but emotions as a pure factor, like just the emotional reactions of people, including the archaeologists, when dealing with archaeo-gaming. My research is based at the University of Glasgow, so I'm a PhD student there. My name is Luca Ottonello, and I'm on my final year, so I'm kind of wrapping up all the different information and work that I've done until now. And my work was dependent on basically understanding through archaeological analysis, through the analysis of certain literature, which were the different gaps that we had in emotive understanding. Because there's a lot of emotive research. I mean, there's the Emotive project with Sarah Perry, Katie Forey. There's other projects that had to do with accidental analysis of emotions, like Ruth Ringham or Moser, with their accidental research on Çatalhöyük, and they had they reconstructed an area in Second Life, and then accidentally they realized that people were using different avatars that were completely different from what they looked from the outside to represent themselves, and there was a kind of an emotive connection to why they were doing such a thing. And I'm kind of building up on top of these theories. The beginning theory was trying to understand why they were doing certain things, but in a technical term. And instead, for me, it's more of understanding what emotions are they actually dealing with, what are they feeling, including, it's not just the audience, it's not just the people we're trying to make these representations for, but also the people that are trying to create these representations, like, what are they feeling when they get maybe a reaction like, oh, I didn't like it, or I didn't have any reaction to it, like, oh, why did you even do that? Like, the public does react like this. It's quite normal. So, is emotion important for archaeology? Well, I would say it is, because without emotion, I don't think we would even have archaeology. And what is the passion for archaeological research? Why is there? If not because archaeologists and people enjoy history and recollection of the past, enjoy it. That's an emotive reasoning. The presence of digital context in archaeology, like how are we recreating these things? Are we doing them just because we technically need to reconstruct something? Just because we need the facts to be shown? And are the facts really facts? I mean, most interpretations, regardless of how technical they are, they have some sort of emotion behind it that make them subjective inevitably. And if you're saying, oh no, we only dig and find facts in the floor, and tomorrow that fact is going to be true, tomorrow someone else might find something else that will completely say the opposite. So it's subjective to that moment, to what the research says in that moment, and what the person is doing in that moment. So I think emotion is quite crucial to what we're doing. So can game technology help with the emotive issue? With understanding what emotions archaeologists are going through, what emotions people are looking at archaeological work are going through? Yeah, it can be. But we have to look at a bit more in detail. So we're going through archaeology and emotions. As I explained, emotions are quite crucial to what we're doing. It pushes us into doing the job that we're doing. Museology and anthropology have a lot to do with emotions, and it's very difficult to technically structure them. Like in a museum, for example, if we're trying to show something that could possibly create a negative emotive response, I don't know, a museum about the Holocaust, a museum about something that happened during a war that is quite near to contextually and culturally to someone that is visiting a museum. These are all responses that we might or might not expect. You could have one response and one completely opposite response from two different people at the same moment. So these are very difficult things that both museology and anthropology have had to deal with, and it's still kind of high up in, we're still trying to deal with it. So, introducing the digital world, we're introducing this gamified world. and we're thinking, oh, maybe there is a solution there, maybe we can use it to represent these things. But we're still going to the facts and hard issues in there. The Emotive project came up with some interesting ideas that kind of pushed me into doing this research, especially one from Sarah Perry, which was the fetishism of the historical narrative. Like we're trying to follow this and do it as the archaeologists or historians understand it, but we are kind of leaving on the side the storytelling and emotional storytelling that the public would be reacting more to. So having a look at these things and having a look at how we could actually get the public to deal with this, to react in a more positive, or maybe if we mean to, in a negative way, it really depends on what type of reaction we're actually expecting the public to have. That would allow us to have a better connection with the public itself. So the Moser and the Tringham situation was inserting yourself in the environment. These people were inserting themselves and making their own avatars, which were monsters, orcs, look completely different from the reality. But is that actually different from the reality? Because this is how the people felt inside. So if externally you're not showing yourself like this, emotionally, internally, you feel like this. So you're expressing yourself even better than reality in this situation. So the modern games that we have now have distortion of emotion. They kind of try to guide you into this particular emotion. Especially in the commercial area, they kind of go like, oh, we need to have a very strong reaction here. It needs to make people like cry, suffer, or enjoy this. And they're not really going through a storytelling system that looks at is the person able to integrate themselves in the storytelling? Are they able to express themselves in the storytelling? And that's an issue that's constantly going on even in commercial gaming. So imagine the archaeological gaming we're still dealing with, we're still trying to develop it. It will have, or still has, this issue itself. So what I found out throughout the research is that there were a lot of expressions of what I call negative emotions. Could be, I mean, the better explanation for this would be complex emotions. But negative emotions is kind of like a reaction that someone is not enjoying it, someone hates it, someone is completely furious about what you're showing. And this is not researched that much because it's controversial, it's difficult to deal with it. And just take care about ethics form when you're dealing with this type of research. I've literally had to fill for 3 months ethic forms to make sure that I had gone through the right steps not to traumatize people while they were playing my game. So it's a very difficult concept to deal with. And nostalgia came in as another concept in this research, which was unexpected for me, which combined with the negative emotions. You can have nostalgia, which is, I miss the old times, and you can have nostalgia like, I feel comfortable and like in the past when I'm dealing with this particular event in the game, but at the same time I feel uncomfortable because it was a really hard past. So there was this very complicated, I called it nostalgia, but even the definition of nostalgia, when I had some interviews with the authors, I'll go on to that in a moment, they also had some problems trying to define what nostalgia was. So I had these two focusing areas, negative emotions and nostalgia. And what I did, sorry, I keep on getting too close to this. What I did was I chose a small pool of experts because, quite frankly, there's very few experts in the area of emotion. And I tried to find as many as possible, so the ones that actually replied, I managed to interview them. And I asked them a series of open questions. The open questions were regarding the research that they had already done, so I was kind of targeting some of their particular work, like the Emotive project, like with Maria Condomon, she did the work on Zarathustra, which was kind of like the Antonine Wall with different stories that were emotionally connected. And I asked them, what was there in between the lines? Like, how did you feel when people reacted differently to your game? What were the feelings that you wanted the people to have when they were going through that particular game in the museum? And the answers were kind of surprising. Some of them were as expected, some of them were kind of like completely out of what I was expecting. And going through all these different things, like, oh yeah, here are some statistics about the things that I went through. 21 authors in total. That was between like 10 authors that I interviewed at the beginning to create an archaeological game, and then another 11 authors that I went through after that I asked to play my game and give me a response to it. And I had 24 hours of open-ended questioning, excruciating for them mostly, because I constantly kept poking, like, oh no, I need to know more about this. Oh, do you have 5 more minutes? So I kept on having really long interviews with them, but they were really worth it. And I did 3 years of game design, so basically I slept 3 hours a night for the last 3 years, which I'm pretty sure most game designers will feel the same way as I do. And yeah, 4 hours a day doing that. And I produced, in total, 3 hours of a game, which if you look at the commercial projects that there are nowadays, like 20 hours is a small one. I did a really small game in 3 years, but all the design inside, as you can see, the pictures that I've been showing you until now, all these are part of the game. These are all my designs. So I didn't ask anyone else to integrate any of their digital technology or programming in my game, because I wanted particular emotions to be evoked by both the objects and the people inside. So it had to be crafted very closely to what I needed. So I didn't have the luxury of going to someone else to do it. So once I had these interviews, there were some key concepts that came up that were very, very interesting. One of them was this concept of precision, this concept of avoidance of subjectivity at all costs. One of the people I interviewed was Dr. Watterson. She was very vocal about this thing. The archaeologists are there, they were going insane. This is not exactly how it's supposed to be. We lost most of the papers, so we don't know how exact measurements are for this thing, so they wouldn't accept it. And yeah, a year of work, they asked them, oh, can you change it? Can you change this particular design that you did? There's something here, exactly, it's not as we wanted it and how it's supposed to be according to just some of them, because some others were going, oh no, this is actually right. And yeah, Dr. Watterson just went, of course, I can do a year of work in a second for you. This is kind of like the emotional response that you get from archaeologists, especially dealing with digital design, that you don't normally see on paper. It's the frustration of getting someone that goes, oh, I am going to this precise thing, and I want you to do the work that you should be doing in a year, in a second, because you didn't do a good job after you spent the entire year building up this particular system. And yeah, and ask you to finish it in a month. So that's one particular area I was interested in, like the emotive response of archaeologists dealing with game designs when they finish the job and someone just comes in and says, you know what, it's all rubbish. You've been working for 3 years for nothing. Please change it now. Yeah, you can do it in a second, right? Because they have no idea about the amount of work that goes through doing these things. Then you go into other areas. This is kind of to do with Dr. Perry's idea of fetishism of the historical knowledge. Like, do we actually give people what they're interested in? Are we getting them interested in archaeology, or are we just showing them what we want, what we care about, and they don't actually care, and we're just pushing our agenda into them? It's like, the problem here, the quote from Dr. Dennis was, the problem is that the public that they're interested in is not necessarily what archaeologists have provided in terms of media. The public is interested in depictions of the past, they're interested in being able to experience versions of the past, like feeling immersed in different places and times. This is something very difficult, and it's not just an archaeological concept. Another area that I kind of worked quite a lot with was interconnection between different departments at the university, interconnection between different disciplines. This is something archaeology doesn't do much. We kind of go, yeah, computer science, digital design, and archaeology or history, and we've pushed it really a lot in classics, maybe. But here you're looking at sociology, you're looking at cinema design, you're looking at storytelling to levels of literature. And this need to all be integrated in the system. That's why it makes it so long. That's why it's so long to produce a game. And this is what Dr. Dennis in this particular interview was alluding at. Like, you need to be able to get the public to get themselves immersed in your work, understand it and like it or not like it, depending on the emotion that you wanted them to feel. And it's not done much. We had other responses which were quite interesting also. The interaction between younger people and older people. We're expecting everyone maybe not to know how to use something, or everyone to be able to know how to use everything. We're dealing with very diverse people when we're dealing with archaeological research. What you would have, so for like this case in Dr. Postdoc research was, you had younger people dealing with older people in different generations, and some of them didn't know how to use a phone, and some of them kind of knew they were living in the history that you were trying to represent in the little exercise. And they kind of symbiotically helped each other at the end. So you cannot assume that, oh, I'm producing something only for one audience, or it will only work on this, but it won't work on that. Try putting the audience together. Try getting them to work together when they're using your particular product, your game. Other things are assumptions of culture that we're seeing. So, for example, tourist audiences, this was a project, I can't remember actually exactly where it was, but it was where Turkish culture was expected, people with Turkish culture were expected to have more interest in what was happening on the field, more interest on the objects, the artifacts there. Completely disregarded. They didn't care. They just wanted to know how the environment was, like how disconnected to their own stories in their family, maybe. It was completely disconnected to the objects themselves. And instead the tourists were going like, oh yeah, tell me the history of this, tell me how this developed. So the emotional reactions that you're expecting sometimes from giving a certain representation are completely different from what you're expecting. And the other one, this was one of the biggest ones actually that almost everyone agreed on, the transparent walls. Everyone that worked on the field that had to do with reconstructing something on the field, the site manager, the site director normally goes, we don't actually know what's there, so put an invisible wall there. And you think, okay, well, there's no interpretation there because we don't know what is there, that's the right thing to do. Give it to the audience, may they be archaeologists or not, they go, I'm actually distracted by this wall, what is supposed to be there? And they start creating their own imaginative thing there. So you're not actually helping by giving them a blank slate. You're actually giving them more choice of creating their own interpretation of it, which depending on the interpretation can be good or bad. But the reason for doing this for the archaeologists was not only to avoid misinterpretation. Well, that's not really what's happening. And most of the digital designers and writers of the papers that I looked through were really complaining about this. Avoid the transparent walls. So, let's just, I kind of went through all this piece by piece anyway, so we'll keep on going towards the conclusion of this topic, which it's not actually a real conclusion because I'm still working on it, but basically the interviews with the authors explored many issues in storytelling, the approach of digital design in motif terms, which need to be addressed. I mean, there are many things that are completely ignored because we're so focused on precision that we're forgetting that we're actually producing material that other people need to read, other people need to play with and interact with. The other one is emotions such as negative emotions and nostalgia are intrinsically important. It's not something to be put on the side because it's difficult to deal with. This is mostly what we have most of the time. Like, oh, I have to go through all these ethical reviews. There is a high risk of offending someone if I'm dealing with this with negative emotions. If I go to nostalgia, we'll get into imperialism. We'll get into these particular areas that no one likes. Yeah, no one likes them, but they're there. They need to be studied. They need to be looked through. So that would be my advice going through this research on how the people reacted to the particular game that I actually made. So I integrated all of these things. I actually did, I don't know if, yeah, I did say that I integrated them already. So I made a game now. I'm in the final stages of, I got all the data, I interviewed people again. And in this game, I created triggers where people need to feel a particular emotion, normally a negative emotion, fear, disgust, hate, or nostalgic feelings. And depending on different factors, I had archaeologists, non-archaeologists, gamers, non-gamers. I mixed them up to see how they all reacted differently depending on their particular background. Because emotion is not just where you come from, like culture. You also have, I grew up in this way. I grew up in this neighborhood. My parents were a certain type of people that dealt with some things in this way. So they're very individual. Everyone has a different emotional reaction. So how do you get them to get the same emotional reaction when you're creating these games? That is the difficult part of it. So I was trying to create triggers that would kind of target all of these areas and include as many as possible so that people would react how I wanted them to react. And in some cases it worked quite well, in some others it didn't work at all. It was just completely the opposite. They were supposed to be scared, and they're like, oh, I'm laughing at this. This is so funny. Like, okay, great, you like blood on the floor, that's great. But, I mean, it's your reaction. It's not mine. Everyone's different. But in some other areas, it was like everyone kind of agreed, like, this feels uncomfortable. This shouldn't be like this. So that was the right reaction. The results have shown a strong subjectivity by each individual. Everyone's different. And connection to cultural background, life experience, technical ability, and storytelling experience. That's another thing. Technical ability. You give a game to a person that never played the game before, even giving instructions. Are they able to connect to that game, to connect to that story, and follow it? Or are they just going to go, it's just a game, I can't play it, I'll just forget about it. And most of the time, these people didn't even read the text in the game. So when I asked them, how do you feel about this concept? They're like, what concept? So it's very difficult to target it, especially different groups of people that have different type of skills. And yeah, there's also still going analysis, and there's a wide range of complexity to it I'm still going through. And that's it. If you want to have a look at my bibliography, there's a QR code, so it's always easier than squinting your eyes and getting to it. And that's it for today.